You're watching PowerNation.
Bring it on back. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Carcass. Jeremy and I have a new project in the shop today, which is a certified pile of junk. It's a 2001 BMW 330i, which is the E46 chassis, but we do have some plans for this thing to make it quite a bit better than it is.
Now, we paid just under $2 grand for this car, but we're not interested in the way that it runs or even the way that it looks. We're more interested in it for the chassis. Now, this car is going to be multifaceted, so we're going to be able to take it up and down some hill climbs, run it around the autocross course, and have some fun with it at those track day events. Now, this car is a handful of work, but let me tell you how we're going to get it done. And just like with all of our race cars, the first thing we're going to do is gut the interior, so we can make way for a true race-specific roll cage to stiffen up the car and to keep us safe. We'll also slap in a pair of racing seats. Up front, we'll tear out the stock inline-6 and manual trans and swap it out for a mildly built LS and a 5-speed transmission. The stock brakes will come off and get upgraded to something that's a little more useful on the track, along with some coilover shocks all the way around. An aftermarket set of wheels and racing slicks will make sure the BMW sticks to the track and looks good doing it. Last but not least, we'll add some fender flares, a sunroof delete up top, and a spoiler in the back. We'll finish the car off with a very animated paint job. Before we get started with all the fun work, we're gonna make our lives a whole lot easier and get rid of the doors, followed by the front seats, and then everything else. Take this out the back door. Oh, it's heavy. Oh, hey, look at that wrench. And it's the missing 10 millimeter, the thing that goes missing the most often. We finally found it. $4 pennies. Give that a good pull. Get those out of the way. Keep taking plastic parts out of the way. Oh, look at this. It's called a rebate. Let's count it. These are old bills. 1, 2, 3, $4 bills and a pile of change. So we're up to like, I don't know, 5, 6, $7 just with randoms we've found so far. This is great. We do this more often. Okay guys, we're gonna talk about dealing with airbags. First and foremost, disconnect your battery. And I like to wait at least 5 or 10 minutes just to kind of let all that residual power drain out of the car. Because the last thing you wanna do when you disconnect one of these or start working with it is have it go off in your face. So everything's disconnected, airbag comes out nicely. And we're gonna get it out of the way. All right, let's get this out of here. There we go. Weasel it out through the door here. The interior of the BMW is pretty much all gone except for this dingy carpet. And the last thing we have to do is just kind of get this out of here, then we'll clean up a little bit on the inside. That way Jimmy can make way for the roll cage.
We are well underway preparing our BMW for the roll cage, and if you are building a roll cage for your vehicle, there's a couple important things to consider. Number one, how are you going to attach the cage to the floor? And number two, how are you going to gain access to the top portions of the cage to weld it? Of course, a well-constructed roll cage includes 360 degrees of weld on every single joint, and a little bit of forethought and planning can save you a lot of headache later and give you a good finished product. In the past, we have used 3 different methods and we've achieved very good results. The first method is using a simple 1/8" plate to contour the floor where the cage lands. In some cars, you can get lucky and find flat areas of the floor where only cutting a plate to size is necessary. To access the top of the cage, the plates will be removed, a hole will be drilled in the floor to drop the cage down a few inches, giving some space for your torch. The plates can be reinstalled later and the cage can be final welded. Second, a plinth box can be made. This is a little bit more involved to fabricate, however, no drilling through the floor is necessary. Once the cage is constructed, the boxes can be removed to drop the cage all the way to the floor pan for welding and reinstalled later on. This is the most common method, and the box height can be tailored depending on how much drop you are looking for. Finally, the last method to gain access for welding is cutting the roof off of your vehicle. This can be quite complex, and it often helps to have multiple people available to reinstall the roof after welding. I do prefer this method because it completely opens the top of the vehicle and allows the use of simple flat plates to attach the cage to the floor. The biggest downside is reinstalling the roof, welding, and finishing the seams. With all of that said, the method that we're going to be using for our car is the plinth box method. And I've got a lot of prep work to do, so let's get started. Okay, so one of the most important things about getting the floor prepped for the roll cage is just getting all of the sound deadening off. That way we can grind the paint off and then have a nice, clean, bare metal surface to weld to. And to get all of this sound deadening off, we want to release the glue. And so we're using dry ice and rubbing alcohol. This is stuff that you can just get from your local grocery store. And so putting the dry ice down makes everything really cold, and then the rubbing alcohol will conduct all of that heat or cold to the glue. And shortly here, this stuff should release from the floor, and then we'll get the paint off and have a nice clean surface for our roll cage. As I said earlier, we'll be using the plinth box method to attach the cage to our BMW, and up front we will be building a full box, but in the rear the box is already kind of built in for us already because of the way that the floor pan is constructed. So it kind of slopes down here, and then there's a big vertical drop off all the way into the bottom of the floor pan. So we're just going to use some steel to reinforce the vertical face and this face up top, and we'll weld everything in here, land the cage on top, and then we can just push the cage forward. It'll drop all the way down into the bottom of the floor pan, and then we can access everything up top to weld. So right now I'm just going to whittle away at this folder, create a template, and we'll transfer it to some steel. I've got these areas prepped for our plates. Obviously I have the first one made for the top face. I also went ahead and made the plate for the vertical face. So I'm gonna go ahead and get these tacked in, and then we can move on to the fronts, make the boxes, get everything set up for the cage.
We are knee deep into the E46 build, and Jimmy's got all the interior out and he's ready to start the roll cage. And since we're going to be doing a lot of welding, we've got Gabby in here with Forney Industries, and you guys brought us a stick TIG machine that's going to help us kind of get that car finished up.
Yeah, I brought you our 220 ST, which is our Pro Stick TIG machine. This unit does have some advanced features like high frequency, as well as pulse controls and some arc force adjustments on the stick side of this. And you can also use a foot pedal with this machine or a triggered torch as well. When you're using pulse, it allows you to reduce your heat So it's going to put the top end amperage in. You're able to set your percentage on. So when you're setting your percentage on, you're setting how long the machine is in its high setting, and then it will go down into its lowest amperage setting that the machine is set to. Therefore, it's going to allow your heat to work its way through the material instead of causing warping because you're just putting a bunch of heat into one spot. It is a little bit more of an advanced setting, so you do need to understand TIG functions before you just go ahead and start using poles.
I've been making some great progress on the roll cage, and I have the main hoop structure completely welded. I have some of the driver's side tubes in along with the rear down braces, and I also have the support plates for the main hoop and the rear braces fully welded in, and I do have the plinth boxes for the front just tacked in for now. Something that's really nice to do, if possible, is to completely finish the main hoop structure outside of the car. We have a lot of open space in here, so it's easy for me to get this thing in and out of here. And so what I did was, once I fit at the main hoop, I actually fit up all the tubes and welded everything just out on the table where I can be comfortable, weld everything, flip it over, do the other side, versus welding everything in here. You have to contort your body. It's very time consuming and uncomfortable. So if you can do that, that's a really good thing. It'll save you some time and some headache. So now I'm just gonna try to mirror the driver's side over here on the passenger side. We'll get this thing finished up. That's close enough. All right, I've got a heck of a lot of welding to do. Got to add a few more gussets, and then this cage will be done.
Well, Jimmy did a great job on the roll cage, and we've got the car kind of shifted over here and up on the boxes because now we're gonna make way for our new power plant. So we have to get the engine and transmission out from underneath the hood here. So nothing too fancy, just get rid of a couple key components, and we'll get this thing out of here. All right, then the headlights come out. Since this one's broke, the mounts are broke off, this one's easy. Just do the passenger side. Oh, that one's already loose, look at that. Man, I don't think somebody put this car back together very nicely. It's coming apart nicely though. All right, last thing for the front here, just take off the hood release cable. Separates right there, which is convenient. Now the whole front should come off. It's one big connector yet. There we go. Let's see if there's any coolant even in it. Oh, there's coolant in it. And all over my boot. Not much coolant in it though. I gotta wipe my boot off. These are quick connects, so I think you just do that and make a giant mess. Same thing goes for the bottom one there. All right, and I'll do the AC lines quick. All right, so we have most of everything disconnected up top here. I went ahead and disconnected the fuel line that's in the back. It's a little bit of a bugger to get to, but we've got that handled. So from here, we'll transition under the car. Got the exhaust to tackle, the drive shaft, and a couple cross members. Okay, there's that. I made a huge hole. Heck yeah, brother. All right, that's that. Okay, so we have everything disconnected underneath the car except for the transmission cross member. We do have the mounts loose, so it's just kind of sitting on there keeping this in position. So we'll go ahead and get this picked up here and try to weasel it out of the hole. Little bit, okay, that's that side. Let me check this side. Perfect. The passenger side engine mount, the stud didn't even pull out. The mount just separated from the rubber. Like it wasn't doing anything.
Just old,
Just old.
deteriorated.
Yep. Oh, you know what'll probably happen? That is exactly what I was gonna say. Get it off the cross member. We get jammed in here or not. Beauty. Okay. Don't want this thing rolling off of our blocks here. Keep going. All right, I think you're clear. See you later, 6-cylinder. Now, I have to take this thing outside and give it a bath. We got a little bit of a rain day today, so I figured what better time to go pick up the next part of our BMW build. Since this is a race car and we're a little concerned with weight savings, we're gonna be searching out an aluminum block LS. A well-organized salvage yard is a great place to pick up parts for your next project. Most of the time, they can tell you miles and condition. And as a bonus, they'll even put a warranty on the parts. We've got our LC9 in the shop here and we're just dying to see what it looks like on the inside. So we're gonna get rid of these bigger parts and pieces, take a good look at it. All right, won't need that anymore. Won't be needing that either. Woo-hoo-hoo! Messy. All right, now that we have the engine tore down here, let's talk a little bit about what we have. This is an LS engine, but it has one big difference from the earlier Gen 3 LSs. This is Gen 4, 07 Plus. They have something that's called AFM, also known as DOD, or Active Fuel Management, and all of that lies underneath this cover. Now, once we get it off, I will show you what's going on. So underneath here, it's going to be 4 different solenoids that shut oil flow off to their respective cylinders to drop this thing into a 4-cylinder mode to give you better fuel economy under light load conditions. And for us in our BMW, we are not going to be running anything like that. So what we're going to be doing here is actually completely disabling this, doing a cam swap, doing a lifter swap. That way, our BMW will run on all 8 cylinders all the time. Okay, so I went ahead and took the timing set out of the way. I also pulled all the lifters and the lifter trays. So now we're gonna pull the cam out. Little trick here, so you don't score up your cam bearings as you're trying to walk this thing out. If you put a little extension in there, it'll give you a little more leverage. And then you can kind of use that to maneuver your cam around through the bearings. And then you can walk it out. And if you guys are just doing a basic cam swap where you're not gonna replace your bearings if they're in good shape, this is the easiest way to do it.
While Jeremy's getting our engine cleaned up, I wanted to talk about some of the parts we're gonna be putting back in it. So we went to our friends at Melling Performance and they sent us quite a few things. Some of these parts are just OE replacements, including lifters, push rods, lifter trays, rocker arms, and a timing set. But some of these parts are more on the performance side to help spice up our engine a little bit. We've got their high volume oil pump. We have their beehive valve springs, which are good to 625 lift, and it also comes with retainers and seals. And then we also went with their Class 2 camshaft, which boasts 585 thousandths lift and 228 and 230 degrees duration at 50 thousandths cam lift. These parts are going to give us a little bit of boost in power, and it's going to keep our engine together for a long time.
Well, we're moving right along on our E46 BMW build, and we have our LC9 all put back together with all of our Melling parts. And that started with installing our new DOD Delete camshaft that we slid into our freshly cleaned block. Then from there, we flipped the engine over and added our Sicky swap oil pan that we got from Summit Racing so we could slide this thing in between the frame rails of the BMW. And then at the very end, we installed our valley cover and our front and rear timing covers. But now it's time to move on to the transmission. So we got to get that thing unboxed and on the table and figure out how this all works together.
To pair up with our LC9, we picked up a Tremec TKX 5-speed from our friends at American Powertrain, and they sent us everything that we need to get this thing bolted in the car. These transmissions are really cool because they are a nice compact package with one overdrive gear. They offer 3 different shifter locations, so it'll fit pretty much any application. In this kit, we've got a brand new aluminum bell housing with a full clutch setup, including American Powertrain's Hydramax release bearing plumbed with -3 line. We also have a pilot bearing and all the hardware included to put this stuff together. Some other cool features of this transmission is that it can handle up to 600 pound-feet of torque, and it can spin up to 8,000 RPM, which will be more than enough for what we're throwing at our BMW. The first thing I'm gonna do here is get the clutch set up, and we'll get this whole assembly in the car. All right, ready to get the rest of this put together, and we'll stab the engine transmission in this thing.
Yeah, flywheels on, torque down, it's all set.
All right. One important step to do before you assemble your clutch is to clean the bare metal surfaces. They often have oil on them from the manufacturing process, so anything from brake clean to acetone like I'm using here will do the job, and then we can get this thing assembled, get the transmission on it. Put on a little bit of thread locker. I get the bell housing on here. I've already dialed this in already, so I know that everything is nice and centered.
Suppose you need one of these next, huh?
Yeah, let's try it.
You're gonna have to
Get
help
the
me
lines
with,
routed.
yeah, you'll have to help me with this a little bit.
Sneak these in there.
Go a little further. This takes forever with the wrench, by the way.
Yeah.
Only way to do it, then. Now, before we can set the LS in between the frame rails on our E46, there are a couple things that we need to do, and there's actually one thing that we already did. We went ahead and replaced this rack and pinion here. It was just a good time to do it. The other one was a little worn out. This is just a stock replacement, so it should be perfect when we go to put the car on the track. We're also going to be dealing with some clearance issues as we get that LS down and in here. One of the things that we do have to replace as well is this lower control arm bushing. This is quite a bit smaller than the stock one, and that's just going to help us with some exhaust clearance. Another thing we're going to end up replacing is the stock steering shaft itself. You can see the old one is rather big, and the new one here is pretty small. That's going to give us even more clearance for when we go to set our headers in between the frame rails and attach it to the LS itself. Again, this is a small car, but this all works together to make everything work out. And then when we get time to actually setting the engine in here, we are going to be using a set of motor mounts. Now these just bolt to the cross member. We do have to take the original bushings out of the way, but these will bolt down, and that's going to place the LS exactly where we need it as far as depth in between the frame rails of the car here. Now, the best part about all of this is we didn't have to piece any of these pieces together. We went to Summit Racing. We actually bought a kit to swap in an LS into the E46 chassis. So it's easy as 1, 2, 3, replace these pieces, and we're gonna have that LS sitting in here.
And for the engine, we have these brackets that bolt to the original engine mount location, and then we also have a chassis side mount, and with these together, we can shoehorn this engine and transmission combo between the frame rails.
Well, while you were gone, we did manage to shoehorn the LS in between the frame rails of the E46, and the kit that we got from Summit Racing to mount all of this in here worked out perfectly, except we did have to modify one thing, and that's down here underneath the car. So the kit that we got is set up for a 6-speed transmission. Since we're running a 5-speed, we did have to modify the transmission crossmember just a little bit. Basically, all we had to do was move it forward about 6 inches so the pad would land on our transmission. We also went ahead and tackled some of the fuel system. This is a Corvette-style fuel pressure regulator, so we have the feed and return coming in from the back side, and out of the front side, we have one feed line, and that's what's gonna run our engine. And to continue on with our fuel system, let's talk about the fuel injection that we're gonna be running. Now, we have Phytech's Ultimate Rebel LS system that we're gonna be running on top of our LC9. And the big advantage to the Rebel system is their intake is rather low profile and sleek, and it's really quite short, which is gonna help us because we're gonna have some clearance issues underneath the hood of our BMW. Now, this is a complete kit, so it comes with everything you need to install. You have the intake, you have the fuel rails, you also have your injectors, your throttle body, and all the wiring and everything you need to install this into your next project vehicle. Now, we're not going to install this quite yet. I'm going to do a little bit of work out here, so we're going to start with the fuel rails and the injectors. And then the next step here is to just set our intake in place, on top of the engine, and we'll just go ahead and bolt it down. All right, well, that'll wrap up the intake install, and then when it comes time to wiring everything up, we just have this mess of wires to put into the car, and it's pretty simple. It all just kind of plugs into the sensors where it needs to go. But we're not to that point yet. Obviously, you can see we have a long way to go on the rest of the car. So when it comes time to getting this all hooked up, we know it's as simple as a couple connections. We should be all set. The next thing that we're gonna cross off the list here is the front drive assembly. So just get us one step closer to firing this thing up. And all of this stuff came in a kit, and it's just gonna kinda condense everything down into a neat little package here in the car. And I'll get started with this Corvette style water pump. All right, work on the alternator bracket next. Okay, the alternator here's got a bracket and a pulley set up. Okay, power steering pump's a little tricky because they've got 3 spacers that kind of space everything where it needs to be to keep the belt in line. But take your time and you'll get it. All right, so up next here, we'll put the pulley on, power steering pump here. Then we have the tensioner to put on. Then we also have to switch out the damper here. Well, that'll pretty much button it up for now. Got the front drive on. I just have the belt to put back on it, and the fuel injection is sitting into place. Now we're making leaps and bounds on our E46 BMW race car. We managed to bend up and install a killer roll cage inside here, and we have the LSN 5-speed swapped in. And today we're going to be tackling something that could be a potential problem out on the track, and that's something to do with the fuel system. Now the placement of the stock BMW tank is perfect in the middle here, and what that will do is give our car some really good track manners when we're out on the track, but it does have one downfall. The way that it's designed is the top of the tank itself is pretty flat, but on the bottom it actually has kind of a hump in the middle, and that's to allow the drive shaft to pass underneath it and have some up and down movement. Well, really what that does is creates a left and a right side to the fuel tank. So as you're going around the racetrack and you have a hard left or right hand turn, it can actually pull fuel away from the pump side here, kind of keep it over on the driver's side, and that will starve the fuel pump side, lowering your fuel pressure, lowering your horsepower, and that's how you're going to lose some races. But we do have a simple solution for that. What we're going to end up doing is going to be installing this M series or M3 style baffle around the fuel pump. And what that's going to do is just give us a little more fuel. So as we're kind of making these big sweeping turns, we can kind of hold a little more over here, wait till we get back out on that straightaway, keep our fuel pressures up, stay in that horsepower range, and hopefully win some races. Now, the pump itself is in a very easy location to get to. It's right underneath this cover here, so we'll get that out of the way, get the pump out of the way. Get the locking ring off of here. We'll try to pull the pump out of the way. There we go. So the way that this works is currently right now we have a tube, like a siphon tube that runs from the driver's side over here to the passenger side of the tank. And that tube comes out at the bottom of the stock sump area that's in the tank already. So what this does is takes that tube from the bottom here and it's going to put it up top and fill up this extra little bowl. And at the bottom of this bowl, there's two little holes that's going to allow the fuel to drain out kind of slowly and keep the sump that's down in the tank currently kind of covered with fuel, keeps our fuel pump covered up with fuel as well. This is a very simple solution to keep us out on the track longer, and it was pretty darn cheap too. The trick here is getting it to sit in. Oh, that's gonna go on that side. Oh, perfect. And then get the hose connected. Now they don't fit super tight in here, but that's all it needs to do. And then the fuel pump will eventually kind of come down in here and put pressure down on this so it doesn't move so much. But yeah, that's as simple as that needs to be. Again, for the fuel pump that we're running, this is a stock replacement fuel pump. The 3-liter that was in this car called for about 50 to 55 PSI, and that's more than enough to run the Fitech Rebel EFI system we have sitting on top of our LC9. Again, best part about all this, stock replacement, so it goes right back where it came from and uses the same connections. All right, so one last thing on the fuel side of things. Since we ditched all of the stock wiring in the BMW, we're gonna have to find a way to command the new fuel pump to turn on. And what we're gonna be using is a PDM. This is the same thing that we ran in the road course Camaro, and it should work perfectly in our BMW. So I've got a little test set up here because I need to find the 2 pins or the 2 wires that I need to apply power and ground to. And I think I have that figured out, so we'll just do a little test here. Yep. So if I take those 2 pins and kind of transfer that over to the stock pigtail that we kept from the wiring, looks like the brown wire is going to be our ground, and this white wire with the blue trace is going to be our positive. So I'll label those, be able to transfer those over to the PDM, and when we get ready to fire this thing up, should work perfectly. Well, as you can see, we've got the car up here on a different lift because it's a little too small to fit on the other lift in the shop here, in hopes to tackle a bunch of stuff underneath the car. And now that we have the engine and transmission installed, we have to make sure that when all that power comes back here that both rear tires spin, and that's currently not the case. So what we're going to be doing here is pulling out this rear differential, getting it over on the table. We're going to be putting a couple pieces inside of here, making sure that both these rear tires spin. That actually looks pretty fresh. Somebody's must have been in here recently. All right, so if you want to hold the back, I'll try to get the bolt out of there. And then we'll try to weasel it down. Okay. Can't do much because the pinion's going to rotate. How you doing?
I just need to reposition my hand.
Got it?
Yep.
All right, to the table. All right, so now that we have the differential out, I'm going to take the cover off the back. We have to get rid of these axle adapters here, and then we'll get down to the meat and potatoes. Using a hammer and a punch, we'll knock the adapters free. Once removed, we can access the C-clips that hold in the bearing races, get those out of the way, and remove the diff from the housing. All right, guys, well, we have the rear differential all apart, and I did take the parts and pieces over to the parts washer and cleaned everything up so we didn't have to work with a greasy mess. Now, we're going to be working down here in the spider gear area, and we're going to be installing these locking plates from racing diffs, and what that's going to do is just apply pressure to the 2 outside spider gears, locking them up and giving us full traction when we're out on the track. Now, to get started, I need to get the centering pin out of the way, but before I can do that, I've got to get the ring gear out of the way. Okay, so for the plates, I have to just kind of assemble these. It's got these 4 little springs, put the top on, then we got to head over to the vise, compress that down, and add these little blocks. All right, so I got everything all lubed up. Now all we gotta do is just set her inside. Line up the hole, we'll take it apart. Tell you one thing, that was terrifying. Now, tolerances are extremely tight here, so it is okay to use a dead blow like this to get the pin in. And then we just tighten down this little set screw, make sure there's a little bit of thread lock around there. And that pretty much buttons up the install of the limited slip. Now, one thing to note, from the factory, BMW uses this little snap ring or C-clip down here in the housing, and that keeps this little centering pin into place. Now, those C-clips can fail, and that will allow that pin to kind of slide around and get into your pinion, and you definitely don't want that. So one thing that Racing Diffs does recommend is you just take a little punch here and you kind of peen around the housing. You just create some little dimples on both sides, and that will keep that pin in place in the event that that little C-clip fails. And we definitely don't want anything like that, so we will be peening this. Now, beyond that, we are gonna end up putting our ring gear back on here. We'll get all of this set back into the housing. We'll get it back up in the car.
We're making some good progress on our BMW, and now it's time to start on the brake system. The biggest change that we're making is going to a full manual setup. And why would we want to do this in the first place? Well, in a track and high performance setting, you want to have as consistent brake feel as possible. And in a vacuum boosted system, you might not have full assist at all times. So we went to Chase Bays and got this dual master cylinder, which is a full manual setup. We also had to change our pedals just a little bit. We went ahead and put on an E36 pedal, and Chase Bays sent us a new clevis to change the ratio so we could take full advantage of the manual brakes. So I just have to get this master cylinder through the firewall, and then we can install our pedals. The original firewall only had these two holes, so I went ahead and drilled these two other ones. And this thing goes in there no problem. After I reinstall the pedal, I'll go ahead and install the push rod. To go along with our master cylinder, we also have Chase Bays brake line relocation kit. This is going to be a great way to adapt everything together and also clean up the engine bay because we can get rid of all the stock hard lines. Something else we're going to be doing, and something we have done in the past, is use EBC's stainless steel brake lines. And we love these because they have identical routing to the OE lines, which means it's a true direct fit to our car. They have a lifetime guarantee against any faults or failures. And before we get these, every one is pressure tested, so we know we're getting a high quality product. Now, once we can get the car back up in the air, we can get rid of all the old stuff and install all these new nice parts.
Now, before this thing goes up in the air, we're gonna take care of a couple things underneath the hood to get this thing fired up. One of those being the radiator. Now, we got this one from Chase Bays, and it's designed to fit into an E46 chassis with an LS swap, or really any engine swap. It's got these two little tabs on it that fit in between the frame rails, and we already went ahead and welded on some mounts. So we'll go ahead and get this installed, and then at the end, we'll go ahead and put on the core support. The way that this all kind of falls together, the radiator sits right behind the core support, and we even welded on a couple tabs up here to kind of hold it into place. So this should work out perfectly, and we're one step closer to getting this thing fired up. We do have a couple more things to tackle on the BMW here, but it requires getting it up in the air. The oil pan itself is a tight fit in this chassis, and it makes it really hard to run a stock oil filter in the stock location. So we've got an oil filter relocation kit. It's all pretty basic, just a couple of lines and a little filter adapter that kind of just moves everything out of the way, keeps it away from the heat as well. So we're gonna go ahead and get this installed. Check one more thing off the list. Now, we did end up making this little black bracket piece here, and we're actually just using the stock bolt holes where the AC compressor bracket bolted to. It just seems like a really good spot to put the filter. Plus, when we go to drain it, we'll be able to fall right on the ground in our drip pan and we won't make a huge mess. Now there is a specific way to plumb this in. The pan has it labeled in and out, and so does the adapter here. So we'll get our lines on, tighten them up. Now, to protect our investment that we have in all of our nice parts in our LC9, we're going to be running a Wix filter. Now, Wix not only makes oil filters, they make air filters and fuel filters for your cars, your trucks, and commercial vehicles. And the media that's inside of here is 99% efficient at trapping dirt in your oils. There's a silicone anti-drain back valve that prevents dry starts, and its high capacity is ideal for dirt and dusty conditions like this thing's gonna see when we're out on the track. All right, that buttons that up. Now we'll move on to the next.
While the car has been in the air, I've started working on the exhaust. What we have so far is 3-inch from the collectors into a Y, and then we're just running 3-inch out the back. All pretty simple, just MIG welded stuff that we had laying around the shop. And now that we're in the back, it's time to put the muffler in, and we've got from Black Widow a 10-inch Widowmaker that should give us a nice sound once this thing fires up. I've got a couple more tubes to put in, and then this exhaust system will be finished. All right, we got the muffler in here. That's one more task done, just a few more things until we can fire it up.
With the bottom of the car pretty much buttoned up, it's time to check a couple more things off the list, and one of those is the battery. Now we're gonna be installing an Optima orange top lithium-ion battery, same one that we ran in the Camaro. We're gonna put it back here in the stock location.
One of the last steps before we fire up our engine is getting some oil in it. And because we tore this thing down quite a ways and some of the parts were stripped completely of oil, we are going to prime it with our little tank sprayer. And for the oil itself, we're gonna go with Schaefer's Supreme 9000. This is a synthetic 5W30 multi-grade gasoline engine oil that uses advanced performance additives and a viscosity index improver. This unique blend creates a longer lasting oil that withstands a higher heat range than conventional oil. This is super important for our engine since it will be used constantly at higher RPM operation and see higher temperatures than a standard street engine. Schaefer's also uses friction modifiers, Micron Moly, and Penetro to plate metal surfaces, creating a slippery shield that prevents metal-to-metal contact, reducing friction and wear. Using Schaefer's oil, we can expect durability and a long service life for our engine.
Now inside the car, we did do a very basic wiring job just so we can see if we can get the LC9 fired up. We are running a PDM from Switch Pros, kind of the same one we've run before. And the way that we wired this up, we just gotta turn the toggle switch on here, and then we're gonna use the PDM itself to turn on the ECU, and then we also have a digital oil pressure gauge so we can watch the vital signs along with our handheld from Phytech. So once Jimmy gives me the green light, we'll go ahead and push some buttons, see if this thing will fire up.
All right, go ahead.
All right, I will turn the ECU on. Do we have fuel pressure?
60 pounds.
Perfect. All right, let's see if it runs.
Nice.
There you go. We got oil pressure. Yeah.
Cool.
Oil pressure's reading. So I think we got it.
Yeah, all right.
Runs pretty good. Shut her down. Well, our E46 has made quite a transformation from a clapped out daily driver into a V8 swapped grassroots race car. Last time you guys saw this, we were able to get the LS all fired up. So today we're going to be working on the brakes and the suspension.
And before we get to the suspension and brakes, we've already gone ahead and done some upgrades to the chassis itself. These E46 chassis are notorious for having cracking issues where the subframe mounts into the car. And so to take care of this problem, you can go ahead and install a reinforcement plate kit. So we wanted to confirm whether we needed it or not. And so we went ahead and dropped the subframe down. We did confirm that we had a crack, and we installed our reinforcement plate kit. It's a pretty simple process. You just have to prep the areas where you're going to weld them in, and then once they're welded in, you can go ahead and reassemble the car. This is a crucial upgrade, especially if your car is going to see the track. So if you do build one of these chassis, that's definitely something to look into. So now we're moving on to the suspension and brakes. We're going to get this stuff torn apart and then put some parts in that are really going to make this car handle.
Now, a crucial aspect into any race car are a set of coilover shocks. And our E46 chassis has a set installed already, but we do not know the age or the condition of them, so they will definitely have to be taken out of the car. And to replace them, we went to Summit Racing and picked up a direct bolt-in KW kit for our E46 chassis. Now, on the grassroots side of things, these will work great because they are pre-dampened, so they're basically set up for the car already, but we can do some fine tuning to them to adjust the ride height and to get the car to kind of do what we want on the racetrack. Like I said, all the old stuff is still installed, so we're going to start by getting rid of all that stuff. Now, we are going to be doing a brake upgrade, so I'm going to go ahead and just let the caliper hang here. And well, no surprise here, in the condition of the car, it looks like the boot is torn for our lower control arm, or the ball joint here. So since we're this deep into the car, we're just gonna go ahead and replace that whole thing. So we're gonna get this out of the way as well. Now, to replace our worn out lower control arm, we're going to be using a Duralast OE replacement part. We picked this one up from AutoZone. Now, the best part about it being an OE replacement part, it will go right into our chassis the same way that the stock one came out. This is a great choice for your daily driver, but it'll also work really well on our race car. These parts are extreme tested, so we know it will withstand some of the abuse that it will see on the racetrack. And lap after lap after lap, we will be able to expect the same results out of our suspension. Now, to install our new coilover, we did install a brand new upper strut plate or strut bearing here. There was a little dimple on top. We did grind that off. That's going to allow us to kind of move the top of the coilover in, give us a little more camber. And we also cleaned up the inside of the spindle here, put a little bit of anti-seize on it. And hopefully this all kind of slides in there. We might have to give it a couple little love taps, and then we'll finish up the install. And that's as simple as it needs to be. So from here, we'll go over to the other side, take care of that, and we'll transition, get the back done too. Now we're working on the suspension on the BMW E46, and we've got the front tackled already, and we actually went ahead and installed the rear as well. Now the kit that we got from Summit Racing came with a set of coilovers that we installed in the front, but the back here is a little bit different. We have a coil spring, we have its own little separate adjuster here, and we also have a standalone shock that's in the back. So with all 4 corners done, we're gonna call that a win. We're gonna move on to the brakes.
Now moving on to the front brakes, we went with EBC Brakes Balanced Brake Kit. It revolves around their Apollo 6 calipers, which is a 6-piston caliper, and it includes their 2-piece 355mm rotors, and they also sent us their RPX pads, which are a race pad. That should definitely help us slow down when we're out on the track. Apollo calipers utilize a 2-piece bolted design machined from heat-treated low-pressure castings. Low-pressure casting provides improved consistency, higher strength, and higher caliper stiffness over forged parts. A high-temperature Teflon polyester coating is then used to give a fade-free appearance for years to come. When upgrading a brake system for track use, it's important to look at every aspect of the system. Not only do you want to look at the calipers and rotors, but also the brake lines and even the brake fluid, given that the system operates at extremely high pressures and temperatures. And you want to make sure that the system as a whole can handle the abuse. Now for the rears, we're going to be going with EBC's GD Sport rotors and some yellow stuff pads. For the rear brakes, we're just upgrading the pads and rotors while utilizing a stock replacement caliper. All right, I'm down to the last brake line that I have to install, and that'll wrap up our brake system.
Hey guys, so the next thing that we're gonna be working on are some body mods. Now we already have the brakes and the suspension installed, so now it's time to make way for some wheels and tires, and that starts with a pair of fender flares.
And to get this whole thing started, we're gonna make a line around the perimeter of the flare, and then once we take it off, we'll make a cut line with some tape so we know where we need to trim. And that way we can make some clearance for our new wheels and tires.
Yeah, that'll work. Cool.
I'm using some skinnier tape to define the upper limit of where we can cut. We do need to leave a little bit of material so that we can drill holes and then use the rivets to attach the flares to the car. And we can cut lower than this, but we just want to make sure that we don't cut where we're not supposed to.
All right, before we do any cutting, we're gonna go ahead and get rid of this inner fender in here so we can kind of see what we're working with and to make sure we don't cut anything vital. Now, there are a bunch of screws that hold this in here because it does run all the way to the back. Look at this. On a spark plug too, that's old. Throw this away, that's not going back in. Okay, so with this all trimmed up, what we're gonna do is hold it up here to the line that Jimmy traced earlier, and then we'll go ahead, drill one hole, and we'll get some clecos, hold it into place, and then we'll just keep drilling some holes. All right, so we'll put one cleco on here to hold it in position, and then we'll start coming down the way here. We'll kind of lay everything out, get some good spacing. We grab the corners to make those hold really well, and then we'll lay some stuff out. It does cover the headlight there. We'll have to trim it a little.
All right.
Okay. Go about every 4 inches should be close. Okay, so we have all the clecos in and it's holding the fender flare in place. So pretty simple from here on out. Take the clecos out and we'll replace them with some rivets. Now in the back here, it's basically the same as the front with one major difference. We do have 2 different pieces of metal we're dealing with here. We've got an outer quarter panel skin, and then we have an inner skin, which is kind of the wheel well lip area. So what I did is I cut the quarter panel short, and I cut the inner skin long. And what we're gonna do here is use this extra metal to kind of fold it up, and it's gonna take care of the gap that's in between these 2 pieces. It's gonna keep water out from going places where it doesn't need to go. I also made a bunch of these little relief cuts. It's just gonna make it easier for me to kind of form this metal up. Yes, it's a little more welding, but it's gonna save me some time in trying to form all of this to make it fit. So I've got a couple tools that I'm gonna use, the hammer and the dolly, to kind of do some forming, and then just a pair of channel locks that's gonna kind of bend these tabs up. So we'll get all this bent up, fit into place, we'll weld it all up, then we'll come back, rivet on the fender flare. So by bending these tabs up, filling the gap again, but one thing when I made my relief cut here, you can see that the cut goes almost up to the edge of the quarter panel here. That makes it so I can bend super close to this radius, and then obviously we'll come back, cut those tabs off, get them flush with the quarter, and then that's the gap that I'll weld up. All right, so we have the edge all welded up. Now we're just gonna hit it with the grinder and kind of clean it up. Now, we're gonna add a little seam sealer here, just in case we got some pinholes in our welds, plus those little relief cuts that I made. There's no point in welding those up, doesn't do much for structure here. So we're just gonna use the seam sealer to basically plug them up. So we've given the seam sealer ample enough time to dry, so I am gonna hit this with some spray paint. What we're gonna do here is basically try to stop any rust from attacking this bare metal. Then we'll get the fender flare on it, be the same process as the front, and then we also have the other side of the car to do yet.
We're making some pretty good progress on the exterior modifications of our BMW. And yet again, we have partnered with 9 Lives Racing. They sent us one of their big Wang kits. If you guys remember, we did put one on our Camaro road race car, and we had to make mounts and everything for that. But this is a really nice setup and a complete kit specifically for the E46 chassis. So they send the Wang and also the mounts. So we just have to drill some holes in this deck lid, get this thing bolted up. I'm making a couple marks here on the deck lid just so I can find the center line. And then what I'm gonna do after is I will measure the distance between the wing mounts, and I'll transfer those measurements onto the deck lid. That way we can put the pylons on here, get our holes drilled, and get everything mounted. bottom side here, I'm just gonna use a step bit to make a little access hole so we can get the hardware on the other side. All right, well that does it for the wing installation and a pretty inexpensive way to add a lot of performance.
And to kind of stick with the performance side of things and to kind of sleek the car out, Jimmy did have to remove the sunroof mechanism and glass and the whole deal up here when he built the roll cage. So we have a giant hole up top. So we're gonna do something really easy and really simple. Just kind of add this fiberglass sunroof delete up and in here. So we don't have a giant hole in the top and the sun won't be beating on our heads when we're racing. Kind of just force this in, I think. Look at that, close. Can you come try to push yours down just a little bit so we can go past? There we go. Look at that.
Hey, all right.
Easy, voila.
Need some hardware.
Yeah, we'll mark and drill the holes. We can grab the actual holes that held up the sunroof.
All right.
And we'll get it in there. Safety is a huge part in any race car, but once your car is finished, you have to make sure that you're comfortable while you drive it, and that comes down to which racing seat that you choose. Now, it's not as simple as just jumping online, picking out what cool seat fits in your car. You have to make sure that you fit in that seat first. Now, Summit Racing has a bunch of different styles and brands to choose from, so let's go over what it takes to get those measurements so you guys can order the correct seat. And that starts with grabbing a friend and taking a seat on the ground. Okay, so there's 3 measurements that we really want to know. First one is going to be across your hips, and we use some straight edges to do that.
About 14 3/4, 15.
Okay, then you're going to take a measurement from your bottom to your shoulder.
25.
And then we're going to go across the shoulders.
20.
Cool. Now that we have those measurements, we can pick out what kind of seat we want. Now there's many different styles of seats to choose from. You have a full containment seat with a halo, like the one we have in our Camaro. More of a standard racing seat, like the guys in Engine Power have in their test sled. You have a drag racing style seat, like Detroit Muscle installed in Roadburner. And then you also have a seat that's made for comfort and has a slider, like the one they put in the Mustang. All right, so once you have those measurements, you can jump online, go to summitracing.com, type in racing seats, and we're gonna go down and pick out what manufacturer that we want, or for what seat that we like. And then within the manufacturer's listing, there will be a chart with the measurements that we just took. That way we can take those measurements, figure out what seat we need to order per the measurements that we just took. So we'll click on instructions, calculators over here, charts and guides. And then this will give us a list of the measurements that we took. It also gives you the measurements of the physical size of the seat so you can fit it into the car as well. And then also pay attention, some of these manufacturers do offer some brackets to help you install them in your car. Some of them you might just have to make custom brackets. So from there, once you get your seat figured out, find your brackets, you can get them installed in your car and be one step closer to hitting the track. The new hood looks pretty good.
Yeah, we got a vent too. Cut a hole out, get this thing in there. Should help us keep temps down when we're out on the track.
Right, it just kind of goes with all of the body mods we've done.
It'll look nice at the end.
And that brings us to where we stand today. We've got some big things we want to tackle. We're going to change the inside color of the car and cover up all of this bare metal. We're also going to do something pretty drastic on the outside. You guys will see that coming up here in a little bit. And then at the end of all of this, we're actually going to go out and drive this car on the track. But like I said, we got a lot of work to do. Right now, we are just prepping around the weld areas on the cage, and then we'll get inside here and kind of scuff the rest of the car up, mask it all off, and paint the inside. So in these welded areas, kind of leaves it a little bit dirty when you weld. So what we're trying to do is just knock all of that off and give it a nice clean surface for the paint to stick to. Using Scotch-Brite pads, what this does is put good etches into all of the surfaces, if it's the cage or if it's in the floor. That gives the paint something to kind of bite and stick to. Makes our paint last a lot longer, stick onto it. Especially when you're dealing with like intrusion bars like this, a lot of times you have to crawl over them. So you constantly are rubbing up against the top bar here. So make sure it's prepped well so the paint sticks really well so it can stay on there a long time. All right, so the next step here is we're just gonna kind of clean everything up with some cleaner degreaser. And final step before we move on to masking, and then we can lay down some paint. All right, well, the car's all masked off. Now it's time to paint. What we're gonna be painting the inside with is POR 15. This is their top coat. It's a direct to metal coating, so there's no need to prime anything. We're gonna go ahead and throw our masks on, and we do have an exhaust fan here in the shop, so we'll make sure and flip that on and get as much paint in here as possible, make it look good and last a long time. Now we've given the paint ample enough time to dry, and we did a really good coating on all the bare metal parts of the roll cage, so that should be protected for quite some time. And then on the inside, we gave it kind of a little bit of a dusting. Now we did that on purpose. It's not completely covered. We did that because it'll just go with the theme of the car once we do the transformation of the color on the outside. So from here, we're just gonna unmask it and see how we did. Well, the interior of the BMW went through its color change. Now it's time to focus on doing the same thing to the outside of the car, but we do have a couple things we have to do. Go ahead and hang the doors back on the car. We'll get rid of that big wang in the back, and then we'll get this thing prepped and ready.
We have all the body panels back on our BMW and we're ready to make a big transformation. We have Jimmy and Micah from Graphic Effects and they are ready to put the wrap on our BMW.
Now, the original plan for the car was to paint it, but to keep the cost down, we did decide to go with a wrap. These guys will have this knocked out in a couple of hours, so there's a huge time savings there as well. And by chance, if we just happen to get into a corner out on the track and have some body repairs to do, it's as simple as taking the wrap off, fixing what we need to fix, and then just putting another sheet right back over the top. These guys are ready to get started, so we're just gonna let them do their thing.
Another great benefit to a wrap is because our car was in pretty poor condition to start with, it would take a lot more work to get it to a point where it could be painted versus this wrap was done in just a few hours.
For the color that we chose for the BMW, we wanted something that really stood out on the racetrack, and it's really gonna highlight what we have planned for later. The guys over at Graphic Effects knocked this thing out of the park, but now it's our turn. We're gonna take some artistic liberties here, got a paint marker, and see what we can get into. Doing a process like this, it really comes down to your artistic discretion. What we're doing is just using some paint markers to kind of highlight all of the door jambs and the big areas around the wheels and the tires to give this car a three-dimensional look. It really gives the car an animated appearance while it's flying around the track. With that final line, I think we'll call this good. We might do a little bit more here and there, but for now, we got a whole car to put together. All right, guys, well, it's reassembly time. We've got the wrap all done, and now we're gonna put the car together. First thing we're gonna do is install the drive shaft that we had made to fit our 5-speed transmission. Now, since we did an engine and transmission swap and everything is in a different location, we need to have a custom drive shaft made. And we've showed you guys how to do this before, so we took our measurements and we went over to the guys at PEM Racing, and they whipped us up a drive shaft with the correct slip yoke to fit our TKX, and they even put on the flange in the back to match the adapter we're running on our stock differential. This is a very simple install. Slide it into the transmission, put a couple bolts back here.
Next thing on the list here is to install our wheels and tires, and if you know about BMWs, you know that they use these lug studs, which I find to be kind of a pain in the butt to use. So we went to our friends at Motorsport Hardware and they sent us their 86mm race stud kit. This is a 12mm grade 12.9 fastener with a tensile strength of up to 180,000 PSI, so we know it's going to hold up to the rigors of track use. They come with this black zinc coating, which is going to help protect it from the elements. And these can also accept up to a 25mm spacer, so we can really dial in that wheel and tire fitment. And the best part is they are keyed for a 5mm Allen, so it makes installation really simple. Go with a little blue thread locker. Make sure these stay put. Per the instructions from Motorsport Hardware, we're going to torque these down to 25 pound-feet. And for our wheels, our friends at Koenig sent us their F3S, which is a fully forged split 5-spoke wheel finished in satin charcoal. Ours is an 18 by 10.5-inch wide wheel. And because they are fully forged, it means they are extremely strong and they can make them lightweight. This wheel in particular coming in at about 18.5 pounds. We've wrapped these in Hoosier A7s in a 295/30/18, and we're going to hold it all on with Motorsports Hardware steel race nuts.
And to continue on with assembly, we're gonna go ahead and move inside here and get our racing seats installed. Jimmy's already got the brackets made, so all we have to do is get these in, bolt them down.
All right, get some new headlights in here.
Got her?
Yep.
Sweet, let's get the grill inserts in here and then we're almost done. All right, what do you think?
Yeah, man. Almost ready to hit the track.
Yeah, I got a couple more things to do, get the steering in it, do the quick wiring job, and then we'll be out onto the racetrack ripping around.
Yep, awesome. Welcome back, everybody. Today we are at Polecat Training Center, and today is the day that we are going to test out our BMW. Jeremy's in the hot seat, gonna lay some laps down and test out all the parts that we've thrown at this thing. How you feeling?
It's gonna be a little bit different than the Camaro, but I think it'll be good.
No, it'll be cool to see out here, laying it down, see what kind of times you can put in. And
everybody should see it because it's bright green.
It is bright green.
Cool.
Got sticky tires on it, and it should be fast.
Yeah, I'll get my stuff on and let's go see how it handles.
Mm-hmm.
The car is extremely sticky, really, for what it is. I mean, this is lap number 1. You know, it's a lot lighter than the Camaro. Power to weight ratio here is way different. We just got a baby LS compared to what the Camaro was. A lot more shifting in this car too to keep it in the RPM range, but definitely fun. Man, these tires are just insanely sticky. Got to get used to the track again here, but sun's shining, it's a nice day, that's for sure. Try not to string it out too much. All of our engine parts though should be spot on, so it's really fun to drive. Jimmy did a great job setting up the driver ergonomics, everything inside here is great. Well, lap number 1, it did great. Doesn't run hot, 195 degrees. I mean, I don't think you can get much better than that. And the simplicity and the easiness of an LS, definitely a fun track car. Lap 2 is going to be faster though. You know, there's 2 different routes to take coming up here on turn 3, 4, somewhere around there. So you can go straight and hit the long straightaway, or you can get to the top of the hill here and take the hard left-hander, which is a little more fun, I think. And the car can definitely handle this, so kind of go in and out of these corners, try to hit my apex right. Listen to the tires, slightly self-clearance here a little bit, but when we come out of this, we got a super hard 90-degree left-hander. I think 3rd gear is where I need to be. And the brakes. Big brakes are a must in a track car, and the EBC brakes we have are just dynamite. Like, I got no problem slowing this car down at all. And then you can really kind of let the car do its thing and just kind of hang on it. Let the brakes do all the work. Especially when you're coming into the corners, but hey, we got some turkeys in the corner. They're kind of checking everything out like, what's going on? Ain't nothing better than a 5-speed manual transmission. Oh, you can just have so much fun with a manual. You feel like you're part of the car. And it's an extension of your body, really. God, this thing sticks to the ground. Holy cow. Just so much fun. Let's see if I can hang this corner and stay in 3rd. Oh yeah, no problem.
All right, man, what do you think?
Well, I tell you what, power to weight ratio, just the combination of brakes, wheels, tires, suspension, you know, the junkyard engine that we ran through, this probably could compete with the Camaro just in pure fun factor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the value versus how much fun you have. This was a much cheaper car to build.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty fast still.
Very fast and just a hoot out here on the track. So
yeah.
Hopefully you learned something. We'll catch you guys around the bend.